Hey everyone, buckle up because I've got a story that's going to hit you right in the feels. Imagine working your butt off at a dead-end job, dreaming of a better life, only to have the people you trust most, your own parents, demand every single penny you earn. Yeah, that's right. My parents forced me to hand over my paycheck, leaving me broke, betrayed, and questioning everything I thought I knew about family. But stick with me, because this isn't just a sob story. It's a roller coaster of heartbreak, rebellion, and a jaw-dropping twist that'll make you rethink everything. How did I fight back to reclaim what was mine? Let's dive in. I'm not gonna lie, this is one of those stories that still keeps me up at night, replaying every moment, every word, every sting of betrayal. I'm sharing this because I need to get it off my chest, and maybe, just maybe, some of you out there have been through something similar. So, let's go back to where it all started, in a small, sleepy town in Ohio, during the sticky, humid summer of 2019, when I thought I was finally getting my life together, only to have it ripped apart. I was 22 years old, fresh out of community college with a certificate in graphic design, and I was hustling. I'd landed a job at a local print shop in our little town of Millersburg. It wasn't glamorous. Think long hours, smudged ink on my hands, and a boss who barked orders like a drill sergeant, but it was mine. Every Friday, when I got that paycheck, I felt a surge of pride. It wasn't much, just a little over $500 a week after taxes, but to me, it was everything. It was my ticket to independence, my chance to save up for a cheap car, maybe even move out of my parents' house and into a tiny apartment of my own. I'd sit at the kitchen table late at night, scribbling numbers in a notebook, dreaming of the day I'd have enough to stand on my own 2 feet. Growing up, money was always tight in our house. My dad worked odd jobs as a handyman, fixing leaky pipes or mowing lawns, while my mom took care of me and my younger sister, Emily. We lived in a cramped, two-bedroom rental with peeling paint and a roof that leaked every time it rained. I remember the arguments, the hushed whispers late at night when they thought I was asleep, stressing over bills and debt. As a kid, I didn't fully get it, but I felt the weight of their struggles. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, promising myself that one day I'd make enough money to help them, to lift that burden off their shoulders. That promise stuck with me, even as I grew older and started to see the cracks in our family dynamic. My parents weren't bad people, at least not in the way you might think. They loved us, in their own way, but there was always this undercurrent of control. My dad had a temper, quick to snap if things didn't go his way, and my mom, well, she was the quiet enforcer, always backing him up with a stern look or a guilt trip that could cut deeper than any yell. I learned early on to keep my head down, to do what they asked, because arguing just wasn't worth the fallout. But as I got older, I started to push back, craving my own space, my own life. That's why that job at the print shop felt like a lifeline. It was my first real taste of freedom. The trouble started about 3 months into my job. I'd been saving up, stashing away every spare dollar into a little metal lockbox I kept hidden under my bed. I was so close to having enough for a down payment on a beat-up old Honda I'd seen on Craigslist. I could almost feel the steering wheel under my hands, the wind in my hair as I drove away from all the tension at home. But one evening, after a long shift, I came home to find my parents sitting at the kitchen table, their faces grim. The air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. My stomach churned as I dropped my bag by the door, sensing something was off. They didn't waste any time. My dad leaned forward, his calloused hands folded on the table, and said they needed to talk about my contribution to the family. I remember the way my heart sank, the way the word contribution sounded more like a demand than a request. They laid it out plain and simple. They were struggling, more than ever, and they expected me to hand over my paycheck, every single one, until they got back on their feet. My mom chimed in, her voice soft but firm, saying it was my duty as their son, that family comes first, that I owed them for all the years they'd taken care of me. I stood there, frozen, feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My paycheck? My hard-earned money? The thing I'd been clinging to as my way out? I wanted to scream, to tell them how unfair it was, how I was barely making enough to dream of a future, let alone support them. But the words caught in my throat. I saw the exhaustion in my mom's eyes, the frustration in my dad's clenched jaw, and that old guilt crept in. I'd promised myself as a kid that I'd help them, right? Maybe this was what that meant. So, with a lump in my throat and a heaviness in my chest, I nodded. I agreed to give them my money, thinking it would just be for a little while, just until they got back on track. But weeks turned into months, and nothing changed. Every Friday, I'd hand over my paycheck, watching as my dreams slipped further and further away. I'd lie awake at night, staring at that lockbox under my bed, now empty except for a few crumpled dollar bills I'd managed to hide. I felt trapped, like a bird in a cage, wings clipped by the very people who were supposed to lift me up. The resentment started to build, slow at first, like a smoldering ember, but it grew hotter with every passing day. I'd see my dad buying cigarettes or my mom splurging on little things for the house, and I'd wonder, where was my money really going? Was it even helping, or was I just being used? I started to notice other things too, things I'd ignored before. The way my dad would dodge questions about his work, claiming he had jobs lined up, but but never seeming to bring in any cash. The way my mom would get defensive if I even hinted at wanting to keep some of my earnings for myself. I remember one night, sitting on the porch after a particularly rough day at work, feeling the ache in my bones from standing for hours, and thinking, why am I the one carrying this burden? Emily was still in high school, sure, but shouldn't my parents be figuring this out instead of leaning on me? The anger bubbled up, mixing with guilt, creating this toxic storm inside me. I loved them, I did, but I was starting to hate what they were doing to me. The breaking point came one rainy Tuesday in October. I'd had a brutal day at the print shop, machines breaking down, orders piling up, my boss breathing down my neck. All I wanted was to come home, crash on my bed, and forget the world for a few hours. But when I walked in, I found my dad rifling through my room, my private space. My heart stopped as I saw him holding my lockbox, the one I thought I'd hidden so well. He looked up, not even a flicker of shame on his face, and said he was just checking if I was holding out on them. That's when I saw red. All the pent-up frustration, the months of sacrifice, the betrayal of having my personal space invaded, it exploded out of me. I didn't yell, though. I couldn't. Instead, I just stood there, trembling, feeling this raw, aching pain in my chest. I asked him to leave my room, my voice barely above a whisper, but inside I was screaming. How could he do this? How could the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who cheered at my little league games, stoop to snooping through my stuff like I was some stranger? That night, as I lay in bed, the rain tapping against the window, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to take back control, even if it meant going against everything I'd been taught about family and loyalty. The next day, I started planning. I wasn't going to just hand over my money anymore, but I knew I had to be smart about it. If I outright refused, it would be World War III in our house, and I wasn't ready for that kind of fallout. So, I opened a new bank account, one they didn't know about, at a small credit union across town. I set up direct deposit with my job, so my paycheck would go straight there instead of into my hands where they could demand it. It felt sneaky, almost wrong, like I was betraying them in return, but I told myself it was survival. I needed to protect what was mine, to rebuild that dream of independence they'd stripped away. For a while, it worked. I'd tell them I got paid less because of taxes or some made-up deduction, and I'd hand over a smaller amount in cash I'd withdraw just for show. The rest stayed safe in my account, slowly building up again. Every time I checked the balance on my phone, I felt a little spark of hope, like I was taking back pieces of myself. I started dreaming again, about that car, about moving out, about a life where I wasn't weighed down by their expectations. But deep down, I knew this couldn't last. Lies have a way of catching up with you, and I was living on borrowed time. I also started digging deeper into why they needed my money so badly. I'd overhear snippets of conversations, catch glimpses of bills stuffed in drawers, and piece things together. It wasn't just about rent or groceries. There was something bigger, something they weren't telling me. I remember one night, sitting at the kitchen table pretending to scroll through my phone, while my mom whispered to my dad about the loan and catching up on payments. My ears perked up, but I kept my face neutral, not wanting them to know I was listening. What loan? What were they hiding? The more I thought about it, the more I felt this gnawing suspicion that my money wasn't just keeping us afloat. It was covering up something they didn't want me to know. The unexpected twist came a few weeks later, on a chilly November evening. I'd just gotten home from work, my fingers still stained with ink, when I found a letter on the counter addressed to my dad. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it, privacy and all that, but something about the official-looking envelope, stamped with a bank logo, made me pause. My gut told me this was connected to everything, to the money, to the secrets. So, with my heart pounding, I opened it. I know, it was wrong, but I was desperate for answers. Inside was a notice, a final warning about a massive loan default, tens of thousands of dollars, tied to some shady business venture my dad had tried years ago. My name wasn't on it, thank God, but the pieces clicked into place. This was why they needed my money. They weren't just struggling, they were drowning in debt, and I was their lifeline. I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Anger because they dragged me into this without even telling me the truth. Pity because I could only imagine the stress, the shame, of carrying that kind of burden. I thought back to all the times I'd seen my dad hunched over bills, the way my mom's hands would shake when the phone rang, probably a debt collector on the other end. Part of me wanted to confront them right then and there, to demand answers, to scream about how unfair it was to use me like this. But another part of me, the part that still loved them despite everything, just felt sad. Sad for them, sad for us, sad for the family we used to be before money tore us apart. I didn't confront them that night. Instead, I tucked the letter back where I found it, and went to my room, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do with this information? I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, handing over scraps of my paycheck, while they sank deeper into a hole I couldn't pull them out of. But I also couldn't just walk away, not yet. Emily was still here, still dependent on them, and I couldn't bear the thought of leaving her in this mess. So, I decided to keep playing the game, at least for a little longer, while I figured out my next move. Over the next few months, I became a master of deception. I'd lie about my hours, claim I got paid late, anything to keep most of my money in that secret account. I started looking for a second job, something part-time, to speed up my savings. I even picked up freelance graphic design gigs online, staying up until 2 a.m. most nights, hunched over my laptop, designing logos and flyers for strangers halfway across the country. It was exhausting, but every dollar I earned felt like a brick in the wall I was building between me and this suffocating situation. I'd dream of the day I could leave, rent a tiny studio apartment somewhere far from Millersburg, and finally breathe without the weight of my parents' problems on my shoulders. But living a double life takes its toll. I was constantly on edge, paranoid they'd find out about the account or the extra work. Every time my dad asked about my paycheck, I'd feel my stomach twist, wondering if he could see through the lies. And the guilt. Oh, the guilt was relentless. I'd look at my mom, see the lines of worry etched into her face, and wonder if I was being selfish. Was I abandoning my family when they needed me most? Or was I just trying to survive? I wrestled with that question every single day, torn between love and self-preservation. I also started pulling away emotionally. I'd spend less time at home, picking up extra shifts or just driving aimlessly around town, listening to old playlists that reminded me of simpler times. I'd park by the river, watching the water ripple under the streetlights, and think about my childhood. I remembered the summer days when my dad would take me fishing, teaching me how to cast a line, laughing when I'd get tangled in the weeds. I remembered my mom baking cookies on rainy afternoons, letting me lick the spoon, her smile warm and genuine. Where had that family gone? How did we end up here, lying to each other, using each other, trapped in a cycle of desperation? One night, as I sat by the river, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, hiding and scheming. I needed to confront them, not with anger, but with honesty. I needed to lay it all out, my feelings, my boundaries, and the truth about that loan. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew it might break whatever fragile bond we had left. But I also knew I couldn't move forward without clearing the air. So, I drove home, my heart pounding, rehearsing what I'd say in my head, praying I'd have the courage to follow through. When I walked in, they were in the living room, watching some old sitcom on our ancient TV. The laugh track felt jarring against the tension in my chest. I took a deep breath and sat down, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I told them I needed to talk, that I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I told them I knew about the loan, that I'd seen the letter, and that I understood why they were so desperate. I told them how much it hurt to feel used, how I'd been saving in secret because I felt like I had no other choice. I poured my heart out, my voice cracking, tears burning in my eyes, begging them to see me not just as a paycheck, but as their son. The room was silent for what felt like an eternity. My dad's face was unreadable, his jaw tight, while my mom looked down at her hands, her shoulders trembling. I braced myself for the explosion, for the accusations, for the guilt trips. But instead, my mom started to cry, soft, quiet sobs that cut deeper than any words. My dad just sat there, staring at the floor, and for the first time in years, I saw something like shame in his eyes. They didn't yell. They didn't defend themselves. They just broke. And in that moment, I realized how much pain they'd been carrying too, how much they'd hidden from me, not out of malice, but out of fear. We talked for hours that night, really talked, for the first time in years. They admitted to the loan, to the failed business, to the years of bad decisions that had snowballed into this mess. They apologized, not just for taking my money, but for shutting me out, for not trusting me with the truth. I told them I couldn't keep supporting them like this, that I needed to build my own life, but that I didn't want to abandon them either. We didn't solve everything that night, far from it, but it felt like a start, like maybe we could rebuild something from the ashes of all this hurt. In the weeks that followed, things were different. Not perfect, but different. I kept most of my paycheck, giving them a smaller, agreed-upon amount to help with essentials. My dad started looking for steadier work, even swallowing his pride to take a job at a warehouse. My mom opened up more, sharing her worries instead of bottling them up. And me? I kept saving, kept freelancing, kept dreaming of that car, that apartment, that freedom. But I also started to see my parents as people, flawed and struggling, just like me. It didn't erase the pain, but it softened the edges, made it a little easier to breathe. Now, as I sit here telling you this story, I'm at a crossroads. I've got enough saved to move out, to finally take that leap into independence. But part of me wonders if I should stay a little longer, help them get back on their feet, make sure Emily's okay. I'm torn between the life I've dreamed of and the family I still love, despite everything. I fought to get my money back, to reclaim my autonomy, but at what cost? Can you really walk away from family, even when they've hurt you? Or do you keep fighting for them, hoping one day the wounds will heal? So, I'm turning to you, my listeners. What would you do in my shoes? How do you balance love and self-respect when the people who raised you are the ones holding you back? Have you ever